Hey everybody, hope you're doing good today. We're going to go through Acts chapter 6 on the, usually an AM Devo with me, Beau, but my mic went totally belly up, so we're going to do a lunchtime devotion. And that always means that it's kind of on the fly. I don't know who's going to join. This morning I had a bunch of people in, and then all of a sudden, like 15 minutes in, the mic just went. And so anyway, sorry about that. Anyway, good to be in. As you guys know, I was raised in Southern California. Very progressive guy. Kind of that typical Southern California kid. Never around the Bible. Never around church people. Nothing like that. It wasn't until my senior year of high school that I actually picked up a Bible, started reading it, was quite blown away. One of the things I learned very early on in my Bible reading was that not many people that went to church read the Bible. It kind of blew my mind. I kind of thought as a progressive, kind of atheistic kid that when you went to church, you actually read the Bible. And it didn't click that maybe people were born in it and people just never really read it themselves, which was so unfortunate, right? Here, when I started reading it, I was blown away by the content. I was surprised by what was in the Bible, but also the context of the Bible, that the Bible made sense. It made sense to our world, what's going on in our world. It was a very unique book, and that it had a lot of prophetic material in it that I found to be quite profound. And quite odd. I wasn't used to reading growing up as a teenager books that had such prophetic, such an amount of material that was prophetic, predicting something. And the narrative of the Bible and the God of the Bible, of course, really floored me, that God would love a people that really were messy and messed up and really sick in a lot of ways. And yet God would, or maybe in all ways, and yet this God would chase these people, go after them, love them, care for them, die for them. This whole thing, visit the planet. I mean, just unbelievable. It truly is an amazing love story when you just read it from beginning to end. So today we're in Acts chapter 6. So that's why I love to do my devotions just by reading through the Bible, commenting a little bit, but really just wanting to get us through a chapter of the Bible so that you can learn the Bible yourself. Most of your questions that you have about God would be answered if you just started in Genesis and you just read, but many people just don't take the time to do that. So anyway, welcome. Glad you're back with me at this early lunchtime devotion. Is it lunch? I hope it's lunch because, man, I haven't even had breakfast yet, so I'm ready for lunch too. Okay, so Acts 6, it says, as the believers rapidly multiplied, it says there were rumblings of discontent. The Greek-speaking believers complained about the Hebrew-speaking believers, saying that their widows were being discriminated against in the daily distribution of food. And so an issue raises up in the early church, and it's one that has to do with prejudice. You know, you might say, well, I'm not prejudiced at all. You know, I don't have any issues with being prejudiced. Well, we find how easy it is to be prejudiced. Here you have Greek-speaking Hebrew people claiming that they're being discriminated against by Hebrew-speaking Hebrew people. And notice these are saying that widows were being discriminated against in the daily distribution of food. So the church is collecting goods. They're distributing those goods out, and there's a group of Greek-speaking kind of people that are saying, "Hey, you know, to the Hebrew-speaking, that the Hebrew-speaking, you know, people, Hebrews are discriminating. They're basically, the food is being distributed to a certain group of people at the expense of others." And, you know, this is obviously a big topic today, even in our news, right? The distribution of food aid. I mean, have you heard about that in the news at all? That, you know, when aid comes to the rescue, is there a prejudice in the daily distribution of that aid? That's what's going on here. And so we see that prejudice plays a part in our hearts as human beings. And if we say, hey, I no, I'm not, I really much could be a candidate for being one that is. It would be much better to say, I certainly, as a human being, have all the potential to being prejudiced. And so I need to deal with that heart. I need to look at that. You know, and it's a lot of people, you know, you could sometimes tell that people are prejudiced just by the words they say about another group of people, maybe an ethnicity, or the way they talk. Maybe someone's speaking in a different language, and you might have heard someone ridicule that person, or maybe not into their face, but maybe behind their back because they speak in a different language. So you might have seen that kind of, you know, prejudice, or you might have done it yourself and you go, wow, you know, that's me. I've done that before too. When we're kids growing up, sometimes we can do this and we don't even know we do it, right? We can just be messing around with our friends and then we ridicule someone in junior high. We kind of make fun of them because they're from here, or they're from there. They look a little different here, they look a little different there. Well, man, I look a little different. Certainly, I've had my fair share of people say things to me before as well. Never fun, but deal with it. We got to deal with our heart, or especially this area of being prejudiced. Now it says the 12 were called, and they called on a meeting, and it says all of the believers, they got with all the believers, and they said, we apostles should spend our time teaching the word of God, not running a food program. And so, brothers, select 7 men who are well respected and full of the Holy Spirit and full of wisdom, and we will give them this responsibility. Then we apostles can spend our time in prayer and teaching the word. So I love what the disciples do here. There's many cool things about this, but I think of just my daily life today. One of them is I could lead better. The 12 disciples here lead in a good way. They lead in a right way. And when I mean by leading better, I mean, what is my leadership like? Sometimes a leader thinks that they got to do everything. They got to be everything and do everything for everybody. That's really what makes a good leader. But here you see the best kind of leadership is raising up people that are qualified to be able to take something over and giving them the responsibility to go do it. Hey, you go do this. Notice that they understood, the 12 apostles understood that their mission was to pray for the people, and that takes time to get around, to pray for people, to get to know them and then pray for them, and to teach them the Bible, help them understand who Jesus is, how he is seen in the scriptures, meaning the scriptures they had, which is what we call the Old Testament. And so that's what they said, hey, we got to do this. And this makes sense. This is why when you're at a job, not one person is doing every job, right? There's many things that need to get done. And they understood that. Now, where did they get that from? Where did they get this model from? They got it from actually the Bible they read. Exodus, Moses, a leader, trying to help all kinds of people, but he's overwhelmed. And I think it's in Exodus 17 where Jethro, his father-in-law, says, hey, Moses, what you're doing's not good, man. You're getting too weighed down by everybody. You need to raise people up and distribute the work. You need to be able to give people responsibility to take care of things. It's not just delegating for delegating's sake. Hey, go delegate. Go delegate. No, that's not good leadership. It's just saying go delegate. Well, delegate to who? How should we go about delegating? Notice they don't just delegate to anybody. It's not just, hey, man, we don't want to do this. So, no. The way they delegate is by saying what they are doing. They first say, hey, we are going to be doing this. And so we need to put someone who's responsible to take care of this other situation. Do you see the distinction? One person might say, well, I just don't want to do it, so I need to delegate. I want to delegate. That's not good leadership. You don't just go, I don't want to do something, and then just go give it to somebody just randomly and let them go do it. No, you're still involved. A good leader says, hey, this is what's needed. I need to find the right person for the right job. So it takes time to, hey, let's make sure we get the right person in here. And this is what I will be doing as a leader and doing in my role in this situation, to pray, to teach the Word of God. And so that is a much better model of leadership. It's not just this idea of, I don't want to do it. That's not what's happening here. Notice there's tact that's involved in what they're doing, the 12 apostles. It says, everyone liked this idea, and they chose the following: Stephen, a man full of faith in the Holy Spirit; Philip, Prochorus, Nicanor, Timon, Paramenes, Nicholas, and Antioch, an earlier convert to the Jewish faith. These 7 were presented to the apostles, who prayed for them, and as they laid their hands on them, a way of saying, "Hey, you guys are responsible. You guys now take this." But notice they all have Greek names. Isn't that interesting? They chose a certain group of people that could minister effectively to the Greek-speaking Hebrew people that felt like they were being discriminated against. So it's not like there was a random, like, hey, let's just pick, Joe and Fred and Bob and this kind of thing. No, there was discernment being used. See, a good leader doesn't just delegate because they don't want to get involved and they're too busy and they're not understanding what's going on. No, they're very much involved, but they're just doing a different role in the situation. The apostles were focused on praying and teaching the Bible, helping people understand the scriptures. So cool. Everybody's going to have a different role. But I really see a really important lesson here on just leadership in general, right? Don't be aloof. Don't just delegate because you don't want to do something. Man, not good leadership at all. And it says, so God's message continued to spread. Man, it just worked out perfect. The number of believers greatly increased in Jerusalem, and many of the Jewish priests were converted too. What a mind blower. There might be people that you think never are they going to come to read the Bible. I never thought I'd read the Bible. I mean, I was that guy who just never thought I would ever read the Bible, but lo and behold, man, I fell in love with the Bible and the God of the Bible. These priests, there was a lot of priests that really didn't like Jesus at all. They were very much a part of the group that really led to his crucifixion, really sided with the religious council, the government of the day in Israel, to put Jesus Christ on trial and in that kangaroo court and get him crucified. But here you see that some of them are coming into a relationship with Jesus. They're rightly coming before God, humbling themselves and saying, oh man, gosh, did we blow it? Did we do the wrong thing? And I love that. So you have these Jewish priests that were converted. Man, wouldn't you love a list of those priests to see who they were? I wonder what their story is. Everybody's got a story. You got a story. The ups and the downs, the right turns and the left turns, and then coming back to the book, right? And going, man, I need to learn to walk humbly with God. So Stephen, a man full of God's grace and power, performed amazing miracles and signs among the people. Now, Stephen was one of these men that was chosen to help out in this situation of the daily distribution of food to the widows. So Stephen was the person first listed. So it mentions him as being a guy who was full of grace, and the power of God performed amazing things through him. He was a guy who was just loved the Lord, and the Lord used him powerfully. And it says, but one day some men from the synagogue of freed slaves, as it was called, started to debate with him. It's like the synagogue of, Israelites freed from slavery, that picture of being in Egypt. And so they even had a name of their church. Our church is called blah. Our church is called douche. Like church names today are pretty interesting, right? Like you got all kinds of names. That just, and then they market those names and they make shirts with those names and, got hats on with those names and everything like that. And somehow they relate to, the scriptures in some way, right? And here you have a synagogue of freed slaves, as it was called, started to debate with him. They were Jews from Cyrene, Alexandria, Cilicia, and the province of Asia. None of them could stand against the wisdom and the spirit with which Stephen spoke. Hey, don't you wish today that you could speak with great wisdom and articulate well, and just a wonderful kind of, in a sense, a way that when you speak, no one can really talk against you. No one can really talk against your wisdom. You make sense. You're without any holes in your arguments. Your arguments are able to stand the test, And Stephen was a guy who could debate with the best of them. And he did. And he did it with a lot of grace. He was gifted in that way. He had a gift to be able to do this. It wasn't something that Stephen just, he was just singled out like as the only guy, but he was a person who God supplied him with the grace needed to go up against these religious opponents and go and talk. But he did it, I think, with a smile on his face, man. He did it in a way that, man, people were blown away by him. And so they were persuaded, some men, to lie about Stephen, saying, "We heard him blaspheme Moses and even God." This roused the people, the elders, and the teachers of religious law, so they arrested Stephen and brought him before the high council. Now, this is what our world does very good, our world system, where there's news outlets that if certain things are put out in the news over and over and over, people tend to grab a hold of it and then make decisions and act upon that news source. And this is what you see that's going on here. It says, this is what was said, that, hey, Stephen did something wrong. He did something against Moses and even God. I mean, that's how bad Stephen is. And then what they did is they roused the people, right? They got people, all the powerful people, the elders. They got the other people, the normal folk, the regular folk. They got those folk. Everybody roused up against this person. Do you not think this happens today in our world with all the feeds that we get, all the different, clicks that we have, that we can take and hit and click, just this person's bad, this, and we just get that in our mind. This person's bad. We never listened to them. We've never met them. We don't know. We've never sat down with them. We don't know their mom. We don't know their dad. We don't know anything about them really, but we already have so many opinions of people. It's unbelievable how many opinions we have of people we really do not even know. We have been roused. Isn't that interesting? We get roused in a particular way. How many people hate this person? How many people hate that person? Why do they hate them? Oh, because they said this. Well, did they really say that? Well, that's what the news said. See, we're grabbing some news network and we're calling it our truth authority. It is our authority on what is true about that person. And then we take that and then we internalize it and then we make decisions based on it. And we can find many outlets that can back up that. So we go, man, that is definitely true. But is it really? I mean, how many, weapons of mass destruction? Have you heard that before? Weapons of mass destruction, right? During the time in Iraq, the war out there, the United States and Iraq, weapons of mass destruction. How many times was that said, right? Oh yeah, we got weapons of mass destruction. We got to go do something, and there's no weapons of mass destruction, but that's how it always is, right? It comes out much later that, oh, by the way, we kind of told you a lie to rouse you, Isn't that amazing how easily manipulated we all are? Knowing that I can easily be manipulated, and I am by all of this information that's around us, could I potentially manipulate other people? And the answer is yes. Maybe I too have some issues. Maybe I can be a person who manipulates, try to rouse people up on my side, if I can get people to just see things the way I see them, man, I'm not much different maybe than these people that aren't really the positive people in the narrative, are they? It says, and so at this point, everyone in the high council stared at Stephen because his face, let's see, it says, the lying witnesses said, the man is always speaking against the holy temple and against the law of Moses. And we have heard him say that this Jesus of Nazareth will destroy the temple and change the customs of Moses handed down to us. And at this point, everyone in the high council stared at Stephen because his face became bright as an angel's. Amazing. This guy, man, was one amazing dude. He smiled and shined. He was a guy who just, man, had a lot of joy. And boy, God's countenance, from the book of Numbers, may he shine it. His face be shown upon you. This benediction that's in the book of Numbers, very famous one, right? May God give you peace. This whole idea, this was definitely upon this kind of benediction, this kind of blessing was on Stephen. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you, man. And this is what it's speaking of. This is the Bible they have. They're looking at everything through the lens of their scriptures. And they're going, man, dude, God's countenance is upon this man, Stephen. But notice that these people just continue this revolving door of manipulation and lying and hate to get rid of people that they don't like. It's sad, right? It's a chapter of prejudice, discrimination. Certain people being discriminated against because of their speech, because of their language, how they speak. Stephen being discriminated against because of what he's talking about. I'm telling you guys about the beautiful person of Yeshua, Jesus. And he's teaching Bible studies from his Bible. And people don't like that kind of speech. And so they want to halt that speech. And the way they do it is through violence, through coercion within the court system. It sounds very much like today, I must say, that this happens, I think, more than we would even like to think. That anybody could be turned on in a moment and be brought into a court of law, and that court of law could be manipulated against you, against your favor, for various reasons. The way you are. Maybe people don't like French Canadians, and they don't see my name and they go, man, Beau's French Canadian. I'm not into that. There was a time where, French Canadians were not liked in particular areas. And, so there's prejudice all over and every place. And we certainly want to deal with that before God. I love that Stephen's the great example. It's not just a book of 12 apostles, right? It's not just the book of, about these amazing people called the 12 disciples, 12 apostles, that whole thing. No, you got the no-name dude, Stephen, right? The guy who we don't know much about. But man, God uses him powerfully. And notice they treat Stephen like they treated Jesus. Just as they lied about Jesus, they're lying about Stephen in the same exact way. Jesus said, if they did this to me, they're going to do it to you too if you follow me. And that can be scary because we go, man, dude, would people really hate me because of my love for Jesus? And to think that the answer could be yes, is a mind blower. But it's true. Even me growing up, not knowing any Christians, but I didn't like Christians. And if you asked me why, I didn't know, but I just felt like they were the problem. They were the issue. Those Christian people, they're so prejudiced, they're so jacked, they're so messed up, but notice what I was doing when I was doing all that critiquing. All that anger was coming out of me. I was being what? Prejudiced. Even though I was attacking them for being prejudiced, I myself was being prejudiced against them just because of their beliefs. They have this particular belief that Jesus is the Son of God, God the Son, that came to the earth and died for the sins of the world. And I would attack that and go after that. And it didn't matter kind of who you were. It's just you were on their side. You were part of that crew. And I just wasn't raised around that. I was raised around very atheistic, communistic, Marxist thought. And that's what permeated my brain. And so Christians were the oppressor. They were the ones doing everybody in. So we got to get them kind of thing. But you notice, in seeking not to be like the monster, I ended up becoming like the what? Like the monster. Wow. Isn't that a mind blower? Seeking to follow God, these people aren't following God. Instead, they're going to kill Stephen. But yet, in the name of God, they're going to do it. So seeking to follow God, and God was just on the planet not too long ago saying, love your enemies. Do good to those who don't do good to you. They ignore that and they say, no, we are following God right. We are, we're the right ones. We don't have hate in our heart, but we're going to kill you. It's amazing how the monster springs up in us so quick, right? So, man, thanks for staying with me on this devotion. Acts 6, it's a good one, and it's one to think about, kind of bring our hearts before God, right, in a devotional sense, and say, God, help us with this. So you guys take care, okay? Have a good day. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.